Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker is here with me via the interwebs as we dive right in to players that are struggling through the first half of the season that, you know, we hope we have a little bit of a soft spot in our heart for these guys, that they'll improve in the second half and turn things around. Justin, good morning. And, happy Sunday. It's a Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't know
if I'd call it a happy Sunday, but I woke up to a few inches on the ground of snow, but my gosh.
Yeah, me too. It's not so bad. You've got your driveway's not actually, I guess I don't know your new place. You're probably not going to go to your new place and shovel. You're just at your rental and you have to shovel there, or are you going to have to go to your new property and shovel there too?
Well, so it's weird. So my new property doesn't have sidewalks, which is great because we're on a corner lot. So if we had sidewalks, that would just be disastrous. That's what I grew up with, and it was a nightmare every time it snowed.
Yeah, me too.
My dad refused to get out the snowblower for anything less than 15 inches of snow. So I was shoveling every time, and he would make me do it. Like, I would be going to bed at 10, 11 o'clock or whatever it is on a school night. He'd wake me up at midnight and be like, all right, let's go out and shovel. I'm like, Dad, I'm sleeping. Please don't. And he's like, no. We're going to shovel now so that there's less to shovel tomorrow. I'm like, no, I hate that. It would drive me nuts.
I get it for shoveling though. You kind of have to, like, you can't shovel
right.
8 or 10 inches of snow at once. Like, it just is backbreaking.
Right. Exactly. So I get that more as an adult, but luckily, again, like I said, my new place doesn't have sidewalks. The driveway is fairly long, not as long as yours, but it's just gravel right now. So I don't know, how much of that I can really actually shovel. Yeah. I'm just going to let it just kind of go. But I know this summer we're going to pave it. So next winter we'll definitely have to shovel that. And then the rental property we're at, same situation. We actually don't have a paved driveway either.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've been to that one. I haven't been to your new spot.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice. So we got just a tiny little sidewalk out in front. It's not just a 2-bedroom house. So not too much to shovel, which will be nice. I'll just take care of that in like 10 minutes when we're done. And
well, if you're putting in a new driveway at your new place, then I strongly recommend a heated driveway.
A heated, okay.
Oh yeah,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean you can you can run your PEX underneath your driveway, and then you just run hot water through it, and it'll keep you heated.
Interesting.
No snow will never melt, or it'll melt as soon as it touches it.
That's a good call. You think, would I need to upgrade from my 40-gallon tank, you think, or?
Oh, you probably have to have like a little separate tank somewhere.
Okay.
That controlled just that. So I don't know how much it would actually be. I've never done it. I've seen it done in like garages a lot, where people want their garage floor to be warmer than what it typically is. So you put in your heated floor in there, but
it's a good call.
But you can do it in a driveway, so it would just be.
Like it.
It's mostly just the cost of the PEX. So, but anyways, I mean, PEX isn't cheap, but it's not that bad. For never ever having to shovel ever again. Hey, I remember I had a friend in high school, and her dad had a heated driveway. They had a huge driveway, and the whole thing was heated. In the middle of a snowstorm, it was just empty. It was beautiful.
Love it.
Anyway, so we said we were going to talk about hockey. You're here to talk about hockey and listen to us talk about hockey. So we're going to do that. There are teams and players across the National Hockey League that, for one reason or another, they've struggled to start the year. And that start to the year has moved on to now we're halfway through the year. They're still struggling. And we are here to motivate them, to encourage them, and inspire them to have a better second half. So take this as, whether this is a little, hey, remember this guy? Somebody probably dropped him in fantasy. That's always a good reminder. But yeah, there's just hockey in general. If this guy's on your favorite team or a team that you hate and you're hoping that they continue to struggle, whatever your cup of tea is. We're going to talk about players who've struggled in the first half. I've got a list of about 15 players and teams. Justin's got 10. So mine are in no particular order. Did you order yours in any way?
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. Well, let's dive right into it. But I kind of want to start the show because I know you've got at least one on there. Do you have any goalies that made it onto your list?
Yeah, I've got 2 goalies that made it onto my list.
All right, let's hear it.
All right. Well, first goaltender I'm gonna throw out there is Jordan Binnington from the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, he's had an interesting year.
Yeah, interesting is a good way to put it. I mean, so you look at his save percentage, .906, and it's like, okay, well, that's a little bit low par, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But again, a 3.05 goals against average, and then when you look at what Husso and Lindgren have done, .938, .958 save percentage, I'm just thinking, okay, well, clearly it's not, the team in front of him. I mean, St. Louis has been playing phenomenal every single night, and Binnington just isn't up to form right now. He just, I'd like to see a save percentage at least 5 or 6 points higher. And, for me, again, it's just he's been fortunate to have a team in front of him that's played so well, and he's about to lose his starting job to Husso if he doesn't pick it up here soon.
Yeah, I have one other goaltender, and that's, I think the most obvious, maybe the most obvious pick for this entire list is Philip Grubauer, who has just struggled tremendously, an .883 save percentage, .326 goals against, which some of that is, of course, indicative of the team in front of them. The Seattle Kraken have not been good, but even a player like Karel, I'm going to butcher his last name, Vejmelka, the goaltender for the Arizona Coyotes, who shut the Leafs down and made me cry one night. We had over 45 saves. Terrible team, even worse than the Kraken, and he's still potting a .905 save percentage, .328 goals against, which the goals against in some respects is a lot of it's the team for the most part outside, the Jordan Binnington. When you look at your other goaltenders and they all have much better statistics than you, then you got to look inward. But it's not as if Chris Driedger has much better statistics than Philip Grubauer, but that save percentage is rough. He has not looked comfortable all year long. Not many pundits when I'm listening to different podcasts and radio talk show stuff about just hockey in general. When people are talking about players that are struggling, I don't hear Philip Grubauer come up too often. And I don't know if that's just because they're assuming that Seattle hasn't built much of a fan base, so they're not, and they're bad, so they just kind of ignore it. But Grubauer was expected. He's a Vezina Trophy finalist, and he's expected to come in here and give them a chance to win every night, and it has been quite the opposite.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, why people aren't talking about him, because, again, I think people expect Seattle to be bad, so you're not expecting all-worldly goaltending, right? But,
sure.
Again, .883, 3.26 goals against. To me, those numbers are just not good enough, even on a crappy team. Listen, I've been watching, obviously I've had my Red Wings here for the last couple of years struggle, and they've been towards the bottom of the standings. But, there's been a goaltender who signed with New Jersey this year, Jonathan Bernier, who has still managed to put up some really, really good numbers on such a terrible team. Now, is Bernier better than Grubauer? Maybe not, but still, there's, when goaltenders are still quality goaltenders, they'll find ways to still put up some decent numbers, even on crappy teams.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's other goalies that, that we could hit on that maybe haven't had the most fantastic start to their year. Robin Lehner's been fine, but I think that there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to Lehner. Particularly, some of it is because there's been so many injuries, but a .903 save percentage, not the greatest. He's lost 11 out of his 29 games, he's only won 16 of those, and that's just for how good that team is supposed to be. You kind of knock them a little bit for that, especially what Marc-Andre Fleury was able to do last year with a very similar team. But we'll see. Like he is the poster child for holy crap, hold on to this guy in fantasy because everyone's coming back for Vegas, and it's likely that they make a little push here and pull further ahead of Anaheim and Los Angeles. And I mean, the Pacific Division has turned out to be so much worse than we could have ever imagined. Like, for all the Anaheim, really cool story. Los Angeles, also a pretty cool story. Like things have worked out for some of these teams, and I mean, Edmonton's a disaster case. Calgary's probably, because they've played so few games. I mean, Calgary's probably that one team where you're like, okay, they'll likely figure things out here. Edmonton's not getting any goaltending.
Oh my gosh,
it's just been the entire division is bad outside of Vegas. I think that I thought that Edmonton and to start the season, Edmonton was 16-9. So to start the season, Edmonton looked great, and here we are though. Vegas is really the only legit team in that division. Anaheim, LA, they've got nice pieces coming. They're playing decent hockey right now. I mean, it's fortunate for them that they're in such a poor division. They're not only playing more regularly against bad teams in this division, but the teams Anaheim if you go by, like, let's just take out OT loss points, and just go straight win-loss. Anaheim is second in that division at 20-23. They've won 20 of 43 games. And LA has won 20 out of 41 games. I mean, this is not a good division at all. Whereas, the second place team in other divisions, Nashville's 8 points ahead. Tampa Bay's 14 points further ahead, and Carolina's 9 points further ahead in far less games than what Anaheim's sitting at. I mean, this division is just bad. And I don't expect them to necessarily get any better. I think that it's just a rough division. Other than, if Edmonton can scoop a goalie and maybe start to win here a little bit, but
yeah, we talked about it on the last show, but I'm already hearing Korpisalo's name. It's like they were listening to the cast.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think Justin's onto something.
They're like, oh yeah, hey Justin, oh that's a good idea, Korpisalo. Let's investigate. Let's do it. Yeah, so I guess in terms of teams for me, teams that have struggled, I mean, you've got the Edmonton Oilers have to be the top of that list, right? Like you could do an entire show just on how the Edmonton Oilers have struggled, and I mean they're the team you got to look at and go, I mean, this can't get worse. Can it? Can it get worse?
Oh, I think it can. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I purposely left them off this. Will it is the question, right? I think to me, I left them off this list just because I felt like we could, like you said, spend a whole entire show just dogging Edmonton at this point. But I mean, will it get worse? I don't know if it can get much worse than this. I think, as long as you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the team, I think they can kind of keep their heads above water just enough in this division to stay within, grasp of a third place spot. But man, I mean, don't get me wrong, they looked decent last night. Leon Draisaitl looked great against Calgary, and Koskinen actually looked like a goaltender with 44 saves. But
yeah, it's actually amazing to me that they keep putting Koskinen out there, but I don't really have anybody else to send out there. No. But
Stuart Skinner, and that's about it, really. And
he's
can't trust the starting job to him. So
no. Yeah, I mean, it also is amazing to me that now I guess this is Ken Holland's patience, and it has absolutely, as a Red Wings fan, I'm sure that you can think back to points in time where his patience just killed you. You're like, dude, you got to make a move, do something. The problem only is when Ken Holland does something, it usually ends up being the wrong move. At least in the last 15 years. I don't know. Did I send you that thread of all the moves that Ken Holland had made in the last, basically since the Red Wings won the Cup in 08, 08, right?
Yeah.
That since that point, all the trades that he's made, and there's maybe like one move where you're like, all right, that was a good move. All
and
the
to
rest,
me, the only move that was pretty good was when he flipped Datsyuk's contract and a first-round pick to just move back like 2 spots in the draft with Arizona, who picked up Jacob Chikrin. And that was, to me, that's been the really only good move, in my opinion.
Yeah, he hasn't really done much for you lately. If you're a Red Wings fan towards the end there. And I mean, the Red Wings, in fairness, I think there was a lot of like, do whatever you have to do to make the playoffs. That's all we're just going to ride this out. Like, they delayed the inevitable of being bad. And I think that they thought that getting that new arena, they kind of figured, well, if we're going to be bad, let's be bad in a new arena to start it out. Like, at least we're going to get people coming to the new arena. And they kind of held out until the Joe died, and that streak died with him. Okay, let's dive into some forwards though, as I think this is the fun part of it. Who appears first on your list? Who do you got? Who throw out a name?
All right, first name I'm just going to throw out again in no random order, but it's going to be Tyler Seguin of the Dallas Stars.
Yeah.
To me, you know what? It's funny when they were very competitive and at the top of that division. Seguin was centering that top line with Jamie Benn on the wing.
Yep, going to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right now, you've got Jamie Benn centering the second line with Tyler Seguin on his wing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Ben's a decent faceoff guy, but that's just it's odd to watch. I mean, Seguin right now sitting at a paltry 19 points through 38 games. Yes, 12 goals is nice, but I mean, a -14, second worst on his team, and it seems like they just can't take off, right? Like the engine started and they're coasting a little bit downhill, but they haven't taken off yet. And I'm waiting for them to hit their stride and go. And now you're hearing John Klingberg obviously isn't going to get a new deal done before this year, and rumor is he's going to get traded.
He's outie.
At what point do you just say, okay, let's blow this up? I know they're a couple years removed from a Stanley Cup final, but this isn't that same team. They're not going to go in and beat you 2-1 every single playoff game, and they're not definitely going to get all-world goaltending now that Ben Bishop's retired. I don't think Khudobin is that goaltender anymore. Jake Ottinger, he's fine. Braden Holtby's fine, but they're not going to steal you a series. So to me, if there's, again, if Dallas wants to get back in it and say, you know what, we're going to be competitive in this division, it's got to start with Seguin, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're still within striking distance here of the playoffs. They're only 2 points back. They've got 4 games in hand. They do have to also jump Calgary, but they're definitely in a position where this can still happen for them. They can still make the playoffs. So I like the pick with Seguin. It's pretty clear that he is no longer the player that he once was. Like, I mean, even you date back to like 1920, he had a good season. He had 50 points in 69 games, not terrible. Goes into the playoffs, has 2 goals in 26 games for 13 points, and really since those playoffs, I mean, he's really just averaging 0.5 points a game, which it isn't terrible, but for a guy who's making, for all intents and purposes, $10 million a year, I mean, he's one of the highest paid players in the NHL, and he's just not producing. And on top of that, really just he's not scoring any goals. It's just not happening for him. And I think that injuries are a big, like, it's just been a culmination of things for him, and he's just not aging well. He's only 29 though. So you think, all right, he's got to be in the position to where he could turn this thing around. I don't know if it's going to be this season. I wonder. I don't think that Dallas is going to fire Rick Bowness mid-season, but I do wonder if he needs that coaching change to kind of find his offense again and be put into a spot where he can really produce. Because, I mean, you look at the other side of it and you look at Joe Pavelski, who's 37 years old, and the guy just keeps going. He's 43 points in 38 games. Like, how is Seguin not looking at Pavelski going, I need to be like this guy. Like take me on your regimen of whatever it is that you do, because it's not working for me. 29 years old and your body's falling apart. Like Jamie Benn, I understand why his body maybe is, failing him in the way that he had always played. He just played a more brute style game, and that doesn't usually, you don't usually stay at the top of your game for 10 years playing the way that he did early in his career.
Yep.
But Sagan's not that kind of guy. Like Sagan was not a floater, but he was always somebody who used his speed and was able to use his smarts to create plays and create space for himself. And he's just not doing that, slowing down, whatever it may be. But yeah, Tyler Seguin, that's someone that desperately needs to find themselves, because if he can, Dallas is in a pretty good spot still. The way that like Hintz has played and Pavelski has played, there's some nice pieces still here. And on top of that, if you can get like Alexander Radulov going again, who only has 1 goal through 32 games, then maybe you've got something.
Yep.
Yep, there it is.
Yep, pretty much.
I'm going to toss out a name. Definitely not the struggle bus that that a guy like Sagan's been on, but close enough. Taylor Hall signed a big deal with the Boston Bruins, and I'd say that the first half has been fine. He hasn't been terrible. 8 goals through 38 games. Best's what he did all of last year almost. But I think when he was brought in here and signed his deal, I think you were expecting more than this. And I think that it's coming. When you look at who he was playing with early on in the year, and now he's been shifted to playing with Pastrnak, we're starting to see those dividends. So, while he's not somebody that struggled all first half, his first half doesn't look that impressive, but he is certainly somebody who I think in this second half, when you take those back 42 games, you are going to look at this and go, okay, this was the right call to sign Taylor Hall. Boston's obviously rolling, and I think that Taylor Hall probably ends up scoring 25 goals here by the end of the season. I think he's going to get hot towards the end, and he is somebody. He's having a fine season, but I think that he's got that potential in there still to have that point per game or pretty darn close to it type of season.
Yeah, and I think at $6 million, right, for me, I didn't put him on my list because I think this is a guy who at $6 million a season is playing exactly where I would expect someone at that salary to play at. Now again, is he capable, and do I typically expect more from a guy like Taylor Hall? Yes, absolutely, and I think he's still got more levels he can go to, and if they somehow could work out and figure out how to find him a center to play with, again, Pastrnak is a line driver, right? He's actually, we're watching him elevate Taylor Hall's game a little bit, and it's given the Boston Bruins a little bit more depth scoring, which they typically, have to roll that perfection line, and that's pretty much it. So this has been nice that they can roll 2 lines out here now, but again, I think if they could find somebody to play center with Taylor Hall, you're going to see his game go to a whole nother level.
All right. Who you got next?
All right. Another forward. I'm going to throw out a name, Mike Hoffman from the Montreal Canadiens. To me, again, this is a guy who, when I made my list a couple days ago, he at the time was sitting, with forwards who had played more than 20 games this year. He was sitting with the worst PDO. And for those who don't know what that is, it's basically your shooting percentage plus your goaltender save percentage. So basically that means that, again, he's not scoring goals. His goalies aren't stopping pucks, and he's not keeping them out of the net either. He was sitting with the worst PDO in the entire NHL of forwards. Now he's moved up that list a little bit, but for a guy who statistically, again, was brought in to score goals because, prior to last year, he had run off a total of 6 straight 22-plus goals a year seasons. And right now he's sitting with 11 points and only 6 goals. Let's be honest, we could probably dog this whole entire Montreal Canadiens team too after, last year's run. But I'm going to cut them a break because they don't have Shea Weber, they don't have Carey Price, and again, I think again, losing a guy like Phil Deneau was very detrimental to this team, and now it's showing.
Yeah, you basically lost your 3 best players.
Right, and basically,
or we'll say 3 most, not necessarily 3 most talented players, but the 3 most impactful players on your team.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what, Hoffman at $4.5 million, I wasn't expecting him to be a 30-goal scorer by any means, but I was hoping for at least 25 goals out of this guy and possibly 40 points, but it doesn't look like it's going to materialize, and hopefully this is just a down year for all Canadians because, man, it's going to be rough.
Signed a big deal
those last 2 years.
Yeah, 3 year, 4.5. That's a big deal. To piggyback on the Montreal train, I also had Nick Suzuki on my list, who, I get it. This year he's only making just over $800,000, so no big deal for the Cap. But you're looking at it. He's about to be making close to $8 million next year. He's got 8 goals through 40 games, whereas last year he had 15 and 56. So he's certainly, whereas last year he's on pace for almost 30 goals, and this year he's barely on pace for like 16, 17 goals. So that to me is concerning. He's like a 50-point guy right now, whereas you were kind of paying him as a 70, 75-point guy. And Nick Suzuki, I think you're not terribly worried in the long term because he's going to have a better team around him. He's kind of been thrown to the wolves a little bit and probably put in a situation where he wasn't ready to carry this type of load yet. But you're making $8 million a year now. I mean, that's the kind of, or you're about to, and that's the kind of money. When you make that type of dough, you better be ready to carry a team. So hopefully this is just some growing pains for Nick Suzuki, and he's put into a better situation next year with maybe a little more talent around him, and not so much losing that, that just kind of compounds on itself. But Nick Suzuki, Montreal can't really get it. I don't think that it can really get any worse. And I'm, even though I think that Kent Hughes coming in, new general manager, it'll be interesting to see what he does and his attempt to put his mark on the team. It'll happen sometime in the next month. They'll probably make some type of move. I mean, they're going to move Ben Chariot. They're gonna make moves, and we'll see what this team looks like. And even though I think they're going to make this team worse on paper, I think when they do that and they start to churn up this roster a little bit, you're going to see Cole Caulfield come back into the mix. You're going to see some of these injured players start to pop back up in here. They're Gallagher's out, Drouin's out. I mean, that's just silly. I think this team will be better for it. I think that they'll have a better second half. There's going to be no pressure. I think they're going to do a better job at managing this roster. So I do look at Nick Suzuki as, hey, he'd be a guy worth scooping up in fantasy, because I think that these young guys tend to have a better second half once the pressure's off and they can just go out and play. And I think that Kent Hughes will take that pressure off too.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm interested to see, again, I love it when a new GM comes in and tries to shake things up with a huge trade, so I'm hoping we get that. Would love to see like a big name like Jonathan Drouin get moved for a piece here and start that rebuild process, because let's face it, the big question moving forward, right, for the Canadians is, what's the long-term status of Carey Price? Is he going to be there for the rebuild? He's
got to go back into physical rehab. Right. Again, they're saying he has to basically start his rehab over.
Yeah. So, and at what point do you just go to him and say, hey, you know what? I know you're rehabbing, you're trying to come back, but we're going to try to start fresh, and we want to do that without you. So bye.
Yeah, we're gonna eat $5 million and we're gonna ship you off, because at $5 million, Carey Price for 4 more years is palatable, and I think that someone would be like, they would take the risk. Now, is Montreal willing to eat $20 million over the next 4 years? I don't know, I'm certain that they aren't going to trade him at this point because no one is going to. He's at the bottom of the barrel in terms of his value, which is weird to say because he just basically single-handedly led a team to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right.
But then he gets hurt. I mean, you're also. I have to imagine that based on like knowing that, hey, he went into right now he's in physical rehab. He also went into the player assistance. I mean, there's GMs out there going, well, I'm not going to touch a guy who isn't mentally well. That's just the reality of it, which is unfortunately the reason why I think that players, I'm sure, don't do what he's doing. I mean, he's making enough money to where he doesn't care, and he's got a lot of security. But imagine being a player with 1 year left on his deal to say, I'm not mentally well, and you go into the NHL players assistance program. No one's going to touch you. You're not getting a good deal the next time because teams are going to be more weary of, hey, what happens if he has a break and then we lose out on this player? It's not going to be worth signing him to a big deal. So it does absolutely hurt you, at least in terms of your financial and your security there. And Carey Price doesn't have to worry about that. Other players would. But I got to imagine that with that huge price tag, other teams are going, no, we're not. We're not paying somebody $10.5 million to not play.
Yeah, and I think teams are going to want him to come back and show that he's still got it after rehabbing again. And so, maybe somebody will take a chance on him at $6.5 million a season.
He's going to be 35.
Yeah, but I mean, look at Marc-Andre Fleury. He's in his his late 30s there, and still killing it. So
it's true. I mean, I think it's probably time to start readjusting our outlook on very high level elite athletes. You just look at what's happening in football, and it's been happening for a while. I mean, Tom Brady's 45, Aaron Rodgers is 37, and basically the MVP of the league. There are some pretty darn old dudes, at least in terms of athletic age, and they're still cleaning up. I mean,
we just talked about one guy, Joe Pavelski, right?
Yeah.
Still cleaning up.
Yep, so. And I think there's definitely absolutely more and more of that happening. Especially, you got to think, even 20 years ago, you're still making a good amount of money in the National Hockey League and in any professional sport. But your motivation now, the amount of money that you can make late in your career, I mean, the motivation is there to stay healthy so that you can play as long as you can and keep making the money that you are. Now, granted, you also have to love what you're doing if you're doing it for that long. But I do think there's a lot more money and there's a lot more to spend your money on in terms of keeping yourself healthy. There just is so many things that you can do now, whereas, even 30 years ago, guys were drinking beer and smoking cigarettes after a game. Right. That's definitely not happening now. Now instead of paying for cigarettes and booze, now you're paying for a masseuse to come and rub you down before bed after every game. I just remember Henrik Zetterberg. I felt so bad for him, but how he's I have to I can't walk the next day after games, and I'm getting.
Oh, I know.
Oh man, that guy. And he's probably somebody who would have benefited if he had taken care of himself earlier in his career. He probably could have played longer, and that's probably what it is who takes care of themselves when they're 25. You can get away with anything when you're 20, 21, 22. You can do whatever you want, but if you start taking care of yourself earlier, then when you're 37, you hopefully don't have as many problems and you can keep playing. But anyways.
Yeah, and now we're in a league where it's not as physically demanding, right? Early on in your career,
True.
Right? You're not, taking that toll on your body as much either. So
that's a great point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Well, who else you got on your needs to improve list?
My gosh. Okay, so I've got a couple defenders, some goaltenders, and a few more forwards here, but I'll make it quick here. We'll run down some of these players. So first off, I've got Sean Monahan from the Calgary Flames.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think this is a guy who, again, Sutter's come in and he's been playing third line minutes most of the year. I think he, again, his numbers are not what they used to be, and his contract's coming to an end here, after next season. So, at 18 points in 36 games, not good enough for me.
Yeah, he's a 40-point guy, and that's kind of, funny enough, that's sort of where he's been at the last 3 years.
Yeah, I expect a little bit more, and especially if Calgary's going to look to move him. I mean, listen, you got Milan Lucic with 14 points right behind you.
Yeah.
So, come on. When you just look at the comparables there, you can do better, Sean Monahan.
Let's go. Calgary has been an enigma because you've got Johnny Gaudreau playing so well, like playing out of his mind right now, and like you said, Milan Lucic finally kind of living up to what he was supposed to do with that contract. Like, not going to be a guy who's putting up huge points, but so many intangibles, and it's kind of working. But up and down that lineup, they're kind of getting mixed results from certain players. Like Blake Coleman hasn't been impressive. That deal is not really looking great right now.
Right.
Basically $5 million into the foreseeable future. But then you've got like an Andrew Mangiapane who had a great start to the season. Hasn't blown my socks off lately, but he can score some goals. But yeah, the Flames are a weird one. It's like all these Canadian teams that have these issues right now. They've a lot of Canadian teams, and I really honestly I wonder how much of this is. I mean, you got every American team. There's some pretty good freedom going on. Like COVID is still, of course, a thing, but for all the teams that are in the U.S. outside of maybe some California, like L.A., it's not like there's really any. Life is pretty normal now, but in Canada, I mean, you're still locking down. Like, this is an ongoing thing for the last 2 years, and I have to think that that's playing at least some factor into some of the way that this is impacting guys on the ice, because we're seeing a lot of Canadian teams struggle, and their American counterparts that were supposed to be not the greatest teams, they're almost taking advantage of it because they're, I don't know, it's just a better quality of life, and I think that it is going to impact you on the ice. I mean, did you see, was it Justin Falk in St. Louis talking about having to go to Canada to play games? Did you see that?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he, paraphrasing, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to go up there and play games, but we have to, so we're going to go. Like, I don't want to go to Canada, but I guess we'll do it.
Yeah, and so that there's two other things here to that point too, right? So you're also going to see guys that maybe have like Claude Giroux, for example, who's a guy that's been talked about being moved. He's got a full no move clause, so he's going to control where he goes. Do you think he's going to want to go to one of those Canadian teams at all? Like, if some team can afford him, like maybe Winnipeg, or somehow manage to squeeze them in their cap space. But if you're a player that has some control over where you go, you're probably going to cross all those teams off your list because you don't want to deal with that shit.
Outside of maybe a guy who's from the area. That would
exactly.
be your
maybe
only
just,
hope.
I really want to go home and play for my hometown, sure.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But yeah, I'll go to Toronto. Like, Toronto's kind of different because Toronto is so good. Like, if you got the opportunity to go from a bad team and to go play for the Leafs, I think at this point you're willing to put up with it, and you know that hopefully the restrictions are going to be lessened. But the way that things have gone, you don't know when they're just going to go, we're going to put them back in place. Whereas in the U.S., like, it's basically been, it's been decided. We're not going back to, like, in regular life, we're not doing mask mandates anymore. Like, most states aren't. They're just going, okay, well, we just got to deal with this now. We've kind of learned enough. We're just going to roll with it. And in Canada, they're like, no, we want you to be, we're going to take every possible precaution, and we're going to limit everything, close down gyms, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, and when you're closing, right, you're postponing all these games, right? If you're a team like Calgary or Edmonton, when you were getting on a roll there and you got to stop for 3 weeks from playing, and now it's like, well, there goes our mojo. It's gone.
Well, that, and you look at what happens if you're. Oh, by the way, I got to tell you, this is funny. I was listening to 32 Thoughts, and one of the questions, I don't know. I think that whoever asked this question listened to our last show, because I asked the same question. Someone on there, Ask 32 or whatever, they take questions at the end. They asked, what happens if a player has already played 70 games for a team, they get traded, and then the team that they get traded to has 16 or 17 games left. Do they get paid more? Is there any compensation for playing more games? And their answer was no. That it's all just based on the year. So you don't. But the record is 86 games played in a year.
That could be broken. Yeah, it could be. If you get traded to a team like Edmonton or Calgary, I could see that happen.
Yeah. Right now, the team with the least amount of games played are the Ottawa Senators. So if you get traded from the, I don't know why Tampa would be trading a player to the Ottawa Senators, but they played 43, so that would be 9 games that you could potentially play more than.
So you could do 91 games, all said and done.
That would be funny. That would be funny. But yeah, we could see that record broken for sure. Brock Boeser, Elias Pettersson. That's kind of an easy one because both players have desperately struggled. I think that's probably a conversation, like a broader conversation. But both those guys, you have to think that they both are going to have a better second half. It's hard to have as bad of a first half as Elias Pettersson has had.
Yeah, and luckily for them, they've got a new head coach in there who's kind of turning things around a little bit. I think they're 11-3-1 since since Boudreau came in, so it's been pretty good. And hopefully, again, the good times will continue, and they're only going to continue if Boeser and Pettersson pick up their game.
Sure. Other guys that they don't appear to be having bad seasons. I've got Ryan Getzlaf on my list, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
He's got 24 points through 35 games, and that's fine. For a guy last year, he had 17 points in 48 games. So the production he's getting this year is improved. We're seeing a better player. But he had 19 points through the first 18 games. He was averaging over a point per game. Since then, he's got 1 goal, a total of 5 points in the last 17 games. So his last 17, he has looked, I would say he's in a position where he's playing at a lower level than he was playing at last year. And that is concerning to me, especially because, suddenly you're in a position where you're ahead of teams, and now teams are chasing you, and I can't see Anaheim continuing to play as well as they have. And now in that stretch, in the games that he's played, you're looking at they have won 2 of their last 9 games, Anaheim. So that's I guess 3 of their last 10, but 2 of their last 9. That's what we're going with. 2 of their last 9. 2 of them they've lost in overtime. They beat the Detroit Red Wings, and then of course, most recently they pummeled the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is random, but I think Anaheim to me, you got to think that's probably the most likely team to fall from where they are. Their pace has just been tremendous. I just don't see if the production from Getzlaf isn't there, they aren't going to win. He's relied upon for so much within that organization, maybe unfairly, but to go from a point per game to all of a sudden 5 points in 18 games, that's not going to cut it. And the goals notwithstanding, because Ryan Getzlaf has never scored goals, He just doesn't score goals, and that's fine. He's going to set people up, but the people around him need to be scoring, and things have really slowed down for Troy Terry, for Trevor Zegras, and I think Anaheim continues to grow those players. I wonder if they can sustain the spot that they're at, and they're not going to if Getzlaf keeps playing the way he's playing.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? You mentioned the goal scoring part, right? Nobody expects Getzlaf to score some goals, but for me, the rest of the team with the goal scoring is where the concern is mostly. Listen, I mean, their top 3 goal scorers right now, Sonny Milano, Troy Terry, and Trevor Zegras, they're accounting for 32.8% of their total goals. And the next highest goal scorer is Rickard Rakell, who, in my mind, is going to get dealt by the deadline because Anaheim's going to continue to slip. So when you lose goal scoring from him, and then
he's also on my list.
Rickard Rakell?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, right. And then you've got honestly, Troy Terry and Zegras are not going to be able to keep it up, in my opinion. So when this team starts to slow down and Rickard Rakell's gone, I mean, it's just there's no hope for him unless Jonathan Gibson can will them into the playoffs.
Now you're talking Hampus Lindholm. I mean, he could fetch a tremendous price. Josh Manson, who probably one of those guys you're going to keep. You're probably keeping. I would assume you're going to try and re-sign one of them. Neither. Right. Hampus Lindholm would definitely be the pricier of the two. But he's not a guy who puts up big points, so I don't know that he gets you more than what do you think for Lindholm? 7.5, $8 million, probably on the open market. I mean, he's never in the last 4 years. His best season's 28 and 76. So we know he's not a big point producer anyways, but it's those point producers that are making the money. So I don't know that he gets paid a ridiculous amount and for very long. Is anyone out there giving Hampus Lindholm a 7-year deal to take a stay-at-home defenseman to 35 years old? I don't think so.
No, and I think after all the signings this last offseason with guys getting ridiculously long contracts at $9.5 million, I think teams have spent their money. So there's not going to be a lot of teams out there willing to say, okay, well, he's not a superstar on defense for one thing. So yeah, a lot of teams aren't going to shell out long term, and they're not going to shell out big dollars. So to me, this is a guy who maybe gets 4 years, 5 years tops at $7 million at the most.
Yeah, if he does get the extra years, it's because he's getting like a $5-6 million deal. Maybe he gets more term for less dollars. I certainly, the way that things have turned around, I could see them going, actually we're gonna hang on to Hampus Lindholm and we'll deal with it in the offseason, and he's played here his whole career. He said he wants to stay. I could see something like that. A lot of these guys have ended up staying with their teams, and I think with COVID too, that if you can stay where you're comfortable, you already have your home, you don't have to worry about that stuff. I think life's just a little bit easier that way. I could see Hampus Lindholm wanting to stick around. He's been here forever. He's experienced good times in Anaheim and bad times, and now you're just starting to swing to where you're a good team. You're in a weak division. I think if you're Hampus Lindholm and you like living where you live, you're probably staying.
Right.
But, all right, let's toss out a couple more names, and we'll wrap up the show.
Cool. All right, I want to throw one out, or a pair of names out there that I think are a little comical that I just want to get out there anyways. But guys that had terrible first halves that I expect better second halves, Evander Kane and Jack Eichel, for obvious reasons. So.
Yeah, Evander Kane's really struggled.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all off ice. But those two guys aside, the next name on my list, I've got Jacob Chychrun from the Arizona Coyotes. I know we've talked about a lot of forwards here, but on defense, an NHL worst minus 31 right now, obviously on a terrible team, and he is playing almost, it feels like, every single minute or every other shift.
I'm sorry, who did you say this was?
Jacob Chychrun.
Oh, Jacob Chychrun. Okay.
Yes.
I missed the name. Was who's minus 31? That's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The
he's
guy's
gonna
playing.
Get dealt.
Yeah, he's going to get dealt. Playing 25 minutes a night. Obviously, a lot of teams would love to get a top pairing defenseman at just under $5 million a season. That is just that's striking it rich right there as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, the minus 31 is just because he's just playing on a terrible team right now. And then for players with more than 20 games, forwards and defensemen included, he is a league worst as far as PDO is concerned. So his guys aren't scoring a lot of goals, and he's
not his
giving
fault.
up a lot there in Arizona. No, not his fault at all. Because outside of Clayton Keller, I mean, there's not a lot of goal scoring going on there. And, you're going to see another guy, Phil Kessel, who sets up a lot of goals, so is going to get dealt too. So, it's going to get a lot worse for Arizona.
I've got two names. My first name, Anders Lee. After he went down last year, the Islanders were in such a good position. He goes down, and they still play pretty well into the playoffs, but I think they sorely missed him, and he has not looked like the Anders Lee that we are used to. He never was somebody who was going to go put up a point per game by any means. 10 goals in 29 games is pretty good. It's good for him. But the 13 points, he's only got 3 assists through 29 games. I know the Islanders aren't scoring. There's a lot wrong there, but they have been better in their last 10 games. They're 7-2-1. They're moving up the standings also because they played way less games than everyone. They've only played 34 games. I think it's feasible to think that they're not going to put themselves in the playoff spot, but they're going to put themselves in the quote unquote running because they'll be the first or the second team out of the playoffs. I don't see them catching the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins are about to catch the Toronto Maple Leafs here. they're rolling, and it's going to be the Bruins are on a tear right now. The Islanders are doing well, but I don't think that they're going to find themselves in the play. I think they've probably dropped themselves out of there too far. They can't score. They've only scored 80 goals. I mean, even the Ottawa Senators, even the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I guess the Canadiens have played 6 more games and have only scored 8 more goals, so we'll see about that. But, they can't score goals. But anyways, Anders Lee, you need him to be better for the Islanders to, if they are going to make the playoffs, if they're going to do a St. Louis Blues type of run, which, once in a 100-year run, if we see that in like a 3-year span twice, that's pretty crazy. But Anders Lee is going to need to be better. And my last name, someone who has 0 goals. Do you know who I'm talking about? Zero
goals. I don't want to cheat and look, so I'm just going to say no. I can't guess here, but
he has scored no less than 14 goals since 17-18 with the San Jose Sharks. Last year he had 17 and 51. So you're looking at a guy who basically was a 30-goal scorer headed into this year, and Jonas Donskoy is sitting with 0 goals right now. 14 assists through 40 games. Just not gonna cut it. You got to score some goals.
This year's Riley Sheahan.
What's crazy? I saw his. I feel like Riley Sheahan. Remember when he scored? He scored what the last game of the season to finally get his goal. I mean Riley Sheahan has more goals than Jonas Donskoy. He has 1.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, you could throw in Riley Nash in there too. I mean, 33 games, he's scored 0 goals and 2 assists.
Yeah, but he was never someone who could score. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was on pace to score 30 goals last year. He has none, not one single goal. That's unbelievable. It's like a light Jonathan Chichu. If he went the whole year without scoring a goal, that would be unbelievable. I think I could probably play 82 games and find my way to scoring 1 goal. I can get to the net and accidentally have a puck go off my butt in 82 games. I'm certain of it. He's playing 15 minutes a game. So. It's not like he's it's not like he's not averaging decent amount of playing time, and it's not like he's not on the highest scoring team in the NHL. That's what's so unbelievable. This team is Florida has 2 more goals than Colorado, but 2 less. Colorado's played 2 less games. I got to think Colorado will find a way to score 2 goals in 2 games. I mean, this team is just scoring goals in droves. They're a plus 47. I mean, how do you not have one of those 165 goals that your team has scored? Crazy.
I know, even Louis Eriksson's got a goal. Okay, let's just put that out there.
Oh my gosh! Also, I mean, James Van Riemsdyk. If I'm going to throw out a high-paid player, James Van Riemsdyk is really struggling in Philadelphia. I don't know that he's. I think he'd still. I mean, he's got 10 goals through 41 games, so probably put into a little bit better of a situation, he could still put up 25. Maybe in a real good situation, 30, but. He's also a minus 19. Like, he's just not being played properly. I mean, he's definitely you got to put this guy in the offensive zone as much as possible, but you get him to the net. You get the right players around him. He has great hands, but playing on the team that is definitely playing the worst hockey in the National Hockey League right now, the Philadelphia Flyers.
10-game losing streaks.
Yes,
2
crazy.
Unreal.
Why is it that the Flyers always seem to have these insane streaks? Like, even dating back to several years ago, it's like they remember there was a year they had a 10-game winning streak and a 10-game losing streak very close together.
Yep.
Yeah, they
unreal.
And I believe they're on an 11-game losing streak. Their franchise record is 12. They play the Dallas Stars tomorrow, Monday, and then the Islanders on Tuesday. So there is the potential that by Tuesday they've set a franchise record for most losses in a row. Those are 2 teams that are fighting for their life. And the Flyers don't have much to fight for anymore. They're dead in the water, and we'll see. They might make a second coaching change, I think. I think Mike Yeo might be out. I mean, he's only the interim, and I think that he might be out. They're playing that bad. 2 different coaches have been on 10-game losing streaks. How often do you see that?
I don't know if we've ever seen that.
I'd be curious to find that out. But James Van Riemsdyk is somebody who I don't know that he gets dealt unless Philadelphia is willing to eat half his salary. I think then you could justify it. But nobody can afford $7 million right in this moment. And if you're Philadelphia, you're probably going, well, we're just going to hang on to you and see how you do next year, and we'll figure that out later. But he could be a dark horse player to be dealt if Philadelphia's willing to play ball and eat some salary. But James Van Riemsdyk probably better to be have a better second half. Right. As all the Philadelphia Flyers, God, they need a better second half. I've got Konechny on my list too. And I mean, it's pretty easy. You go to the bad teams and you look who's struggling. It's actually, it's very indicative. It shows you that you look. It's easy to get caught up in looking at teams and going, "Wow, that team is really struggling. Why are they struggling? Oh, it's this culmination of all these players." Well, when you go to those teams and you look at what their players have done in terms of production, it's usually pretty easy to go, well, that guy's having a bad year, that guy's having a bad year, that guy's having a bad year. When it's 3 or 4 guys who usually are pretty good are all having bad years, you're going to have a bad year. Your team's not going to be good. And it's amazing how much, as much as we like to say that hockey is this all-around team sport, you need everybody contributing. If 2 of your players are really struggling, there goes your team. That just is what it is. It is as much of an individual effort as it is a team game. Well, Justin, I think we've done well.
Yeah, I like the names. I do want to throw one more out there.
Okay,
I know we talked about a couple teams, but it's only been lately, so it hasn't been an entire first half. But this is more of a a little poke at you because I know they're your favorite team. But Toronto's defense lately has been a little too soft for my liking, and
it's
going to rebound in the second half
for Sheldon Keefe too.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to see a tougher D to play against. I watched that Rangers game, man, and they scored every goal in front of the net like it was nothing.
They did shut the Islanders down last night, though.
That was good, but I mean,
not hard to do.
Be honest,
not hard
right.
to do. But I don't disagree. I think we're kind of in that, like, this is that time of year where it can get real difficult to play hard-nosed hockey for all 82 games. Like, you start to go, we're kind of are where we are. You know, it's, you go through those little lulls. I'm not too worried. Also, whenever Jake Muzzin is out, like, you're just going to be softer.
Right.
If your defense is built around Jake Muzzin, and he's not there, you're probably going to be a little softer than when he's there.
That's a given.
I did actually have Mitch Marner on my list.
Oh, nice. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I know, and he did have a really slow start, and I gotta tip my hat to him. He finally scored a power play goal for the first time in, like, what was it, like 100 games or something like that? He got a power play goal.
Right.
He went on that crazy little stretch of no power play goals. Yeah, he had 0 last year in 55 games, and 6 the year before. Yeah, it was like, what? It was something crazy. Yeah, it was like almost 100 games, I think, that he didn't
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, it was like one of the longest, weirdest little streak. He had like 60 shots on goal and just never scored. And then he scored against, I think it was the Rangers, actually, that he scored that goal against. But only 20, like, for someone who has put up big numbers, you know, he's more than a point per game guy, sitting at 26 and 29. If he's going to get to that, you know, 90 point spot that he was at a couple years ago, which is what he's been on pace for every year, he's going to need to have a better second half. And if you get a better second half out of Mitch Marner, how much better are the Leafs? Like, right. They've already been very good. I wouldn't say that they've been great, but I'd say that they've been very good. I think it's a lot easier to look at, like, you look at the Rangers, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Lightning, and the Panthers, and I think I probably like those teams better than the Leafs. In a 7-game series, anyone could win, but I think that the Leafs have they have a little bit of work to do in terms of getting themselves that extra piece to kind of put them on the same level as those teams.
Okay.
That would be my thought on that. But anyways, okay, well, you can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and we will talk to you guys sooner rather than later. Have yourselves a great week.